Hello and welcome back to Marketplace Tech's limited series Decoding Democracy, where we're talking about mis- and disinformation in the 2024 election. I'm your host, Lily Jamali. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about India's general election, which began on April 19th and will continue until June 1st. With nearly 1 billion eligible voters, the election has been described as the largest democratic exercise in history. And tech platforms are already playing a huge role. For more on that, I'm joined by Raman Jit Singh Chima. He is Asia Pacific Policy Director and Senior International Counsel at the human rights organization Access Now. Raman, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So this election, of course, has Prime Minister Narendra Modi of the BJP party seeking a third term, huge stakes. In addition to being the world's largest democracy, India is, of course, also the third largest economy in the world. But just as we have seen here in the U.S. with our election, AI-manipulated deepfakes have been a part of the election in India already, including this one featuring Bollywood star Amir Khan. Let's watch and get some context from the Indian news outlet Mint.
क्योंकि यहाँ का हर एक नागरिक लखपति है, हर एक के पास कम से कम 15 लाख होनी चाहिए.
This video of Bollywood actor Amir Khan has gone viral on social media. He can be seen and heard asking for votes for the Congress and criticizing the Modi government. And here is one more video of Amir Khan, once again asking voters to vote for the Congress party. But did you notice something odd in these videos? And no, we don't mean to say that Amir asking voters to vote for Congress is odd, but the videos themselves. If you haven't, well, let us tell you these videos are fake.
So Khan, the actor, later confirmed it was in fact a deep fake. He made that confirmation on social media. He has also filed a complaint with the Mumbai Police Cyber Crime Division. First off, what did you think when you saw this video making the rounds?
I think it's very troubling to see the capabilities that AI-generated deepfakes have. But I think it also reminds me that if in Amir Khan's case, this was caught, I think it's more important for us to think about the fact that the exploitation and misuse of any person's identity should be taken seriously. I'm worried about the number of direct, for example, potential cyber fraud or scam activity we might see targeting individuals where it's not immediately caught and revealed. So it's both troubling to see the capabilities that might exist, but it's also particularly alarming for me that in Amir Khan's case, obviously it was quickly detected and the fact that it's fake was broadcast. But for others, including in more direct situations, that information may not be easily out there.
Right. I mean, this is probably the highest profile example so far in India's election of platforms missing harmful, misleading content on their platforms. I wonder from you, because it's not just this one, there are other celebrities that are being portrayed this way and other politicians, including Prime Minister Modi himself. What are some other sorts of mis- and disinformation that have made it through these platform filters in India's election so far? One report that I saw suggested that a lot of misinformation that's gaining traction is pushing hate speech and other ethnic divisions.
So indeed, there have been situations involving disinformation about political parties' manifestos and the election promises. We've seen often the publication or circulation in large numbers of fake surveys and polls regarding potential results, with the idea to sway people to join the wave in a particular way or to otherwise provide information that could be problematic. That's an area that already is known to be a situation in India. But I wanted to pause for a minute for us to consider the fact that a lot of the attention that we see this issue getting is regarding often high-profile political leaders and celebrities. And ultimately, the reality of what we need to really focus on is the exploitation of, or rather you could say the misrepresentation of any person's identity, voice or likeness should be taken seriously and remedied irrespective of status. We shouldn't focus only on the status of the person in terms of where they are in society or the political position they may hold. What is, however, something that we can draw attention on is who is deploying and using these. So if political parties themselves are commissioning or deploying such, say, AI-generated deepfake videos or other examples of clearly deployed misinformation, we need action on that. But more importantly, we can clearly say that political parties should not be allowed to use that during campaigning. We can focus not on who a deepfake video is pretending to be, but who is deploying the deepfake video in question.
What does the Indian law say right now, if anything, about the legality of creating and distributing these types of deepfakes?
So it's interesting to know that the Indian Penal Code already does criminalize attempts to misrepresent yourself as somebody else, particularly if there's criminal intent or the requirements there. I think what's more problematic in terms of Indian law is how it applies to political parties and the sort of stringent Indian legal requirements that can exist towards political advertisements placed by individual candidates. There's a gray area that Indian electoral law does not regulate political parties. So imagine if I'm a candidate for office, it may regulate me, but a party headquarters is putting out material that's less regulated. And for example, Indian law does not have clear requirements, and that's been an unfortunate stitch up between many of the major political parties in terms of transparency on who is in charge of social media and other election tech deployment, who is keeping sensitive data sets, but also who might be potentially commissioning or using such technologies. That sort of regulation of parties, social media cells, IT cells, and the data they may have of individuals and of voters more generally is not something that Indian law right now clearly regulates strongly enough. And that's because the major political parties, including the present ruling coalition, has chosen not to do more on that.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. Well, Raman, your organization, Access Now, and the International NGO Global Witness published a recent report about online disinformation and YouTube's advertising system. The report says that in India, political parties and campaign managers have prioritized growing their user bases on YouTube. How have they gone about doing that?
I think it's important to remember that political parties in India, according to reports published by independent journalist organizations and others, it's been clear that political parties have described YouTube as a core focus area. And that often senior political leaders, including candidates for office, but also senior ministers or political spokespeople, are using YouTube to connect with the people. It's a definite quiet but very clear growth or target area for political parties and candidates for office in India.
So they've really honed in on YouTube as a tool here.
Absolutely. And I think the best way to see is follow the money. Look at the amount of money that is being spent. And by current known reports, remember, there might be a lot of gray area funding or money that's not being clearly tracked. But over 1,170 million rupees, equivalent to roughly 40 million US dollars, these are figures put out by the Economic Times, India's leading financial newspaper, has been spent on Google itself by political parties and their affiliates. And a large chunk of that would go to YouTube. And particularly there, not just on commissioning YouTube ads, but also on collaborating with influencers and putting out short form video content, some on YouTube, but also on related channels such as Instagram.
Oh, this is very interesting. So there's two prongs to this. There's the purchasing of the advertisements, as well as you just said, the partnering with influencers that's happening on that platform. What is, in your view, the effect that all of this online misinformation is having on this election in India so far? We're in the thick of it right now.
I think it's important, of course, before I answer this, to remember that India is the world's second largest internet user base. So after the People's Republic of China, you'll find the most number of internet users in India. We still, of course, need to see more widespread penetration, but ultimately a large number of Indians access the internet, often through mobile devices. They may not have high performance, high quality fixed line internet access, but they can see videos, they can see this content. And this explosion of disinformation in particular is making it harder to discern between truth and lies. It is hampering the ability of people to cast an informed vote. There already exists a lot of noise, and you could say created noise, that exists during election periods, seeking to drown out what voters need to know. It's sometimes to push voters towards more evocative or problematic issues rather than looking at the facts and looking at what candidates might be doing. But this explosion of misinformation is further putting the burden on them to determine what is genuine and what's not genuine.
Gotcha. So getting back to the report that you recently worked on, this research report, I want to show some examples of English language ads that got approved by YouTube according to your work. For the record, these did not end up airing on YouTube. You made sure that that didn't happen. But here's what the ads in your test looked like. So the first one up on the screen right now is it says, due to an increase in infectious diseases, all voters will be automatically sent a mail-in ballot for the 2024 elections. Stay safe and stay home and stay safe. The second one says voting age has been increased to 21 now. If you are under 21, please don't try to vote. It will be unlawful. So there you have two examples of messages that are clearly there to suppress the vote. What did you learn about moderation standards for online platforms in India doing this experiment? And from what you can tell, how do they compare to those here in the US?
I think it's important, of course, is to put this in context. We put advertisements there into the system for review that were accepted that were 100% blatant, you could say, misinformation. It was clear to any user, even partly informed with Indian context and the laws of the land, that these are untrue. And 100% of them were accepted in that round of review by Google and would have been placed on YouTube if he had chosen not to take them down. I think the best important takeaway for this for your viewers is to see that this is a clear case of YouTube as a platform cutting corners, where they seem to not be worried about the repercussions of lowering standards for review. And in effect, they seem to be not concerned about providing suboptimal services or being concerned about this until at least they were caught, in a sense, with their pants down. And it's not just therefore about the disinformation ads were marked down in the US and allowed in India, but it's the case that nearly almost identical ads were stopped in the United States, but were allowed in India and Brazil. And in effect, for us and for Global Witness, it's clear there can be no technical justification for such a wide discrepancy in the application of the same policy that YouTube claims to follow for the same content between different countries.
So right now, your argument is different countries, different approaches by the same company. Google did respond to your findings. In a statement, they say that their policies explicitly prohibit ads with false claims, adding, quote, "Our enforcement process has multiple layers to ensure ads comply with our policies, and just because an ad passes an initial technical check does not mean it won't be blocked or removed by our enforcement systems if it violates our policies." That, again, a statement, reading from a statement from Google. Are you satisfied by the response there? Because basically they're saying, first of all, in addition to what I just read, that these ads were deleted by your group before those extra enforcement reviews could take place.
No, I'm not convinced by that, because I think the important reality we need to acknowledge is that if we had chosen for these ads to go live the second after the first review happened, which was an option made available to us and we chose not to take, but if we could have chosen that option and the ads would have immediately run live, they would have been viewed by individuals, they would have misled them, and the damage to these individuals and to democracy in the Indian elections would have taken place. I think it's important here to recognize that Google has said elsewhere that these stated protections can kick into place both before an ad runs or quickly after it starts to gain impressions. In effect, they're saying that these tests may only really happen if the content starts becoming viral, which means that the ad immediate initial impact or damage will occur. And therefore, we believe that that is a bias towards publication that Google seems to have for ads on YouTube. And we believe that sort of bias towards immediate publication of advertisements, at least in India, is clearly irresponsible and an inconsistent approach towards moderating paid for content that is directly benefiting YouTube and Google as a whole.
Well, I know this is a complicated and multi-pronged problem, Raman, but if there was one thing you could change about the way that YouTube/Google are approaching this issue in this election, what would it be?
I think there are two things I would ask for. One is simply understand what the problem is. You need to actively talk to vulnerable communities and individuals seeking to ensure the integrity of India's election in order to be able to know what the problem is and the best way to address it. We are troubled that Google and YouTube, as well as many other major tech platforms, have not actively spoken to Indian civil society, human rights defenders, and those working in vulnerable communities prior to the election. I would in fact argue that this general election has seen big tech in particular be as quiet as possible, perhaps for fear of angering the ruling coalition and the present government in terms of the proactive steps they should take. We've seen press statements, we've seen public ads occasionally, we've seen very little conversation and understanding what the problems are. And the other simple thing I would ask and say that Google and YouTube need to immediately change is they need to clearly ensure the policies they have and they follow in the United States and elsewhere when it comes to carefully reviewing ads during an election period are applied in India and other key election locations as well. There is right now a bias towards publishing ads as soon as possible. That seems to be the case in India. We believe that bias towards publication needs to be replaced with an approach of caution and towards careful consideration of ads during this period.
All right. Well, Raman, we really appreciate your insights. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was Raman Jit Singh Chima. He is Asia Pacific Policy Director and Senior International Counsel at Access Now. Thanks to all of you for joining us for this episode of Decoding Democracy. New episodes drop bi-weekly on Tuesdays. If you have stories you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe. Daniel Shin produced this episode, and I'm Lily Jamali.